He's saying, I love her, I miss her. If he loved her, and how come it is to kill your beloved one?
It's 2.5 years since 29-year-old Manpreet Kaur was stabbed to death by her husband, a man so obsessed with the idea she was having an affair, he slashed her throat 8 times with a box cutter. Chamanjot Singh would later convince a jury he'd been out of his mind at the time, provoked into a rage by his wife, who he claims had told him she was in love with another man and would have him deported back to India.
She was not like that, what he said in the court. I was really shocked because he was lying.
When the New South Wales Supreme Court sentenced Chamanjot to just 6 years jail for manslaughter last month, it prompted outrage.
She had 8 cuts on her throat, or more than 22 cuts on her body. How come it is manslaughter?
The Singh case has finally prompted New South Wales to look at changing the provocation defence, a defence regarded as such a dangerous excuse for domestic homicides. It's been reformed or abandoned completely in most states of Australia over the past decade.
The court decided he'd been tormented by Deborah's infidelity.
You know, when are women going to be allowed to leave relationships safely without being killed?
Very bad law in Australia, very bad.
I have covered so many provocation cases that I know that each of them is fundamentally the same, in that in every case where a man kills the woman in his life, it is an act of revenge and she is blamed.
Phil Cleary has spent half his life pushing for an end to what he calls state-sanctioned revenge killings. It was 1987 when Phil Cleary's 25-year-old sister Vicky was stabbed to death by a former boyfriend, just steps from the Melbourne childcare centre where she worked.
We had to put up with the defence talking about my sister, my parents' daughter, as if she was a wanton woman with no regard for a man. He was a good man riled by a bad woman. That was the picture that was painted, and it was horrific.
Vicky Cleary's killer got 6 years for manslaughter, a verdict which would propel Phil Cleary, a former footballer, into politics, to try and put a stop to men like his sister's killer getting away with murder.
He cried. He was portrayed as an alcoholic depressive, a man who so loved the woman in his life that when she abandoned him, he just lost control.
It took the now notorious James Ramage case in 2004 to convince the Victorian government to abolish the provocation defence altogether.
James Ramage bashed and then strangled his estranged wife Julie when she told him she would not be returning to the marriage, was repulsed by the thought of sex with him and had met another man.
Ramage had been sentenced to just 6 years jail for the manslaughter of his wife Julie. But Victoria created a whole new defence category called defensive homicide. The new law was aimed at ensuring people like battered women still had a defence, but stopped men who killed their partners using provocation as an excuse.
Provocation belongs to a bygone era when, in effect, women were chattels and men had to protect their honour.
But criminologist Dr Kate Fitzgibbon says new laws alone don't stop defence lawyers preying on the sympathies of juries.
What we need to get out there is that it's not acceptable to kill someone if they're trying to leave a relationship, and that infidelity also is not a reason to kill someone.
In 2010, Luke Middendorp was sentenced to just 8 years jail after he'd stabbed his girlfriend to death. This despite the fact the court had heard how, even as his girlfriend lay dying, he'd called her a filthy slut who deserved it.
It is pathetic that this man gets 6 years for stabbing my daughter in the back 4 times.
Dr Fitzgibbon says even though Victoria's new defensive homicide laws were drafted to exclude men like Middendorp, the jury was still persuaded he should be sentenced for defensive homicide rather than murder.
I think certainly it shows that law reform isn't always the answer.
Tomorrow, yet another manslaughter sentence will be handed down here at the Supreme Court in New South Wales. In this case, a husband who found his wife in bed with her lover said he was so crazed at the time he stabbed the lover to death. It took the jury just under an hour to decide this wasn't murder, it was manslaughter.
Juries are required to judge the act of the accused the way that they would feel about it if it was happening to them. Often a manslaughter verdict comes in when a jury says, wow, I could react like that if that happened to me.
The New South Wales Bar Association agrees it's time to review the provocation defence, but removing it altogether, it says, would be a fundamental denial of justice. But for Jaspreet Kaur, it was her dead sister who was punished by the law.
I didn't get justice for her.
We're horrified, allegedly horrified, about the Taliban view of women. But what do we say about the Singh case in New South Wales? Wasn't that a revenge killing? Now, we can't talk about being a modern civilised society and then allow women in the courts to have their human rights obliterated.